Welcome to Aliens versus Predator, a show where we will be reviewing every single entry in the Alien and Predator movieverse. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about 1986's Aliens, James Cameron film. Tonight, I'm joined by Mr. George Arevalo from Miami, Florida,
What up? What up?
Mr. Adam Gumbert from Lexington, Kentucky,
Fucking game over, man. Like, fuck it, man. Game over.
a little Bill Paxton impression to get us started. And just a reminder, while we'll be doing these episodes here periodically, we will not be doing our first ranking benchmark until next episode, which will be Predator, at which point we'll check in and we'll throw out our initial rankings, and we'll do that every third episode. Some trivia to get you started before we dive into the discussion of the film itself and give our general impressions. One of my favorite pieces of trivia, and it makes my heart break because he's no longer with us, but Bill Paxton apparently incessantly apologized to young Carrie Henn, who played Newt on the set, for having to curse in front of her. I guess feeling overwhelmingly guilty, and she put him at ease by saying, "It's okay, I don't know what any of these words mean." So I thought that was kind of a cute, sweet story. Speaking of Carrie Henn, I know, like, when we were watching the film, I told you guys this, but in the sequence where she slides down the vent and is subsequently captured, she continuously threw the takes so that she could keep sliding down the vent. And when the filmmakers caught on to what she was up to, they made her a deal. If she would get the shot for them while they were shooting up for, or setting up for the next shots, they would allow her to ride that little vent slide over and over again. And, you know, surprise, surprise, she got the job done on the very next take. The Alien,
that was hilarious.
Yeah, I mean, that's what a kid thing
So
to do,
funny, man.
you know. And only film that she was ever in, by the way. And very much a kid thing to do, like to just be like, "Whoops!" Like I guess we gotta shoot it again. The alien nest that set that was that you see in the film for quite a bit of it was later used as Axis chemicals for Batman 1989. So if you envision the scene where Jack Nicholson character becomes the Joker, gets tossed off the balcony and into the chemical vat, all of that is left over from the filming of Aliens. We'll do some other trivia as we move through and talk about the film, but I always like to start us off with a couple of cool little facts. So let's dive right in. We'll start with general impressions. George, because you're the virgin to this film, I like starting with you on these because you have the most pure reaction, probably of all of us, like, since you're seeing this for the first time. What did you think?
Yeah, I think this is working out great because, like, I can go back and watch my review of the prior movie, and the one thing that stuck out, which I brought, I mentioned to you guys very quickly, was in the first movie I enjoyed it, but I was like, I really wish I got to see the alien, the xenomorph in action, and James Cameron was like, I mean, obviously this is 40 years ago, but it's like, hold my beer. You want to see them in action? We'll give them to you in action. So I love this movie. I enjoyed this movie much more than the first. Obviously more into the action stuff than anything else for these kind of movies. But yeah, to me, I really, really enjoyed this movie. No, we're not really going into too much rankings, but I enjoyed it more than the first one. I'm not saying it's better than the first one, but I loved all the action. Seeing not one, not two, not three, but I don't know how many of these fuckers were all over there, was pretty awesome. And there was some really, really cool scenes in which you got to actually feel like this thing was a legitimate threat as opposed to a stationary figure, like it seemed like it wasn't more so in the first movie,
Yeah, I think, like, where you get, like, the first film, like the crews being stalked one by one, like this is very much like blunt force. Like, these things are like overwhelming you, it's versus like stalking you and like taking you out quietly, like it's very different feel. And the gold, one of the gold standards, along with Godfather 2 and Terminator 2, of like how you do a proper sequel. You do something completely original in a lot of ways. And I think the most important thing all of those films do is they expand that world in an interesting way. And I think this one knocks it out of the park. We'll talk about, I have a whole separate topic of like what your favorite expansion to the universe is, like that we see in this, and we'll do that for every film that we watch. But yeah, man, I am right there with you. This is my favorite. I think like not like necessarily like determining best, but like probably out of all the Alien films, this is the one that has the most rewatchability to me because it is like it's iconic. It's a roller coaster of a ride. Like once it gets going, it is a little bit slow to like start. Like I was watching our runtime, like when we were watching it. But once they hit the gas pedal, like it doesn't stop like until the end of the movie. And I think it's you can kind of forgive a little bit of that setup that they have to do in the beginning.
Yeah.
How about you? Oh, go ahead.
Let me chime in here. I don't think that we mentioned what cut we were watching, right? So this is a little bit longer than the
Yes.
the original version, right?
So this is the special edition, which James Cameron is on record actually at the beginning of the film saying like is his preferred version. They had to cut it down for theatrical release because R-rated movies, as a rule, do less box office numbers anyway, just because there's a more restricted audience to them. So it was kind of a 1-2 punch. The runtime that this ended up being, which is about 2.5 hours, would have been kind of meant that they would get one less showing per day. The way the math worked out, and the studio didn't want to do that, so they had to cut it down.
Yep.
So yeah, we did watch the special edition, and I think it's the definitive. I mean, there's no question. Like if you watch the other one, like it's a little bit tighter, but like all the scenes that are added into this like add tremendous value and like context to everything that's going on.
Yeah. Sorry, I just wanted to confirm that.
Yeah. No, you're good. So Adam, what do you feel about Aliens? Do you like Aliens?
Well, it was fun watching this to realize I've only ever seen the director's cut and not just the original cut, like I thought. So that I've already watched the good version of the movie. I like this movie a lot. I'm with George where it takes away all the horror and all the scary parts of it, but then gives us really cool action and really cool lore, which is the biggest thing that it does is, it establishes the Queen, it establishes they have intelligence. A lot of stuff is built on in this movie, and the whole crew I like a lot, the whole Colonial Marines thing. So I think it's a very well-made movie, and I don't know, maybe in the top of all these movies if we sit down and think about it. But I just love how they took, here's a claustrophobic horror movie, and we're going to turn this into something different, but they're still as deadly as ever. It's just a fun way to take the formula and kind of completely change it with the same criteria.
And such a great title too, right? Both of these movies have great, like the Alien and then like Aliens is like such a clever thing that he ruined that. Like nobody can, I mean, I know they did it with Predators, and we'll talk about that when we get to that, because that ties into some stuff I want to say about that movie. But like like no one can really do that again and have it have the same impact. It seems so obvious, like when you see it, like Alien, and then like the sequel Aliens, like tells you everything you need to know, like going into it, about like kind of what you're in for, or at least kind of hints at it. Great logo too. But yes, it's very, very different genre. And you mentioned like taking the horror out. There's if you notice, like, so there's that chest burster scene when they're on the cocoons. Another little factoid is, James Cameron said that like he knew it was unavoidable. They needed to have like a chest burster scene because it was so iconic, but he wanted to get it out of the way early and wanted to spend as little as time as possible on it, just because like he felt like he was never going to top like that original scene. So instead of going kind of for shock value, it's more of like a wink and a nod, and like, let's move on. And it's the catalyst of when everything goes to shit, because when they set it on fire, all the big boys come out of the walls and shit. So
before I say something silly, were there like books, or these movies are like,
there's novelizations of these two movies later.
But I mean, at the time, this is the first, like, this is happening in sort of real time. This story is being created for the purposes of this movie, right?
Yes.
So I like you mentioned earlier that it was a little slow to start. I agree that it was a little slow, but I felt like it had to be. In many ways, like you mentioned, that there's some things that James Cameron couldn't top, right, in terms of shock factor. But I would argue that he had a significantly harder task.
Yes.
Because he had to create like a lot of backstory, because the first one really didn't have any backstory, right? The first movie, this stuff is happening out of the blue while these people are on, space truckers or whatever you want to call them, right? But it's very much like that could be like the fourth or fifth episode in a TV show, right? Like after you learn about the characters, but it didn't need a whole lot of backstory. But now that you've got Ripley returning and all that everything that's happened in between, the amount of time that's passed, like I feel like he had to do a lot of work to set up what was going to be the rest of the movie and take it in a different direction. So I think he did an excellent job of that, and that's what I found that was really, really impressive. He gave us a completely different type of story while tying it into the first one. The fact that so much time passed does make it a little bit easier for him, but still, like it had, like, I don't know, man, it was a pretty fucking awesome job to follow up that movie for sure.
We've talked a lot about obviously the action, the tonal changes in the film. I want to stop and give a shout out. I think one of the most interesting things that this movie does is it deals with like post-traumatic stress and trauma, and to some extent a little bit of gaslighting, right? Like you don't know it when you're watching it initially, but like clearly, like later on in the movie you find out that the company kind of like knows that this thing like exists, and they're making her feel kind of crazy, right, for like telling the story about what happened. And you're seeing her deal with not only the trauma of what she's been through, but also of being kind of thrown under the bus and kind of labeled as somebody who has, mental health issues, and like that's why she blew up the ship. And I think it's a really interesting angle to come out and it puts Ripley in at a very different space at the beginning, and it makes it that much sweeter as you work through the film to see her kind of face the demons and start kicking ass, and like in spite of all that, and like rising to the occasion once again despite dealing with all the trauma.
I will say, like, I think she gives another awesome performance for sure. Like kind of focusing on the post-traumatic stress, all the things that she's afraid of having to deal with again, and the fact that no one's listening to her. However, I will say one of the weaker elements of the movie, and maybe this had a bigger impact at the time, given how many movies have probably done the same type of shit since then. But like the company was very obviously shady from the start, and then the guy that's kind of like I forgot his name, but the one that ends up, yeah, the guy's like kind of her lawyer or whatever, helping her, that kind of thing. And then he comes aboard on the ship, like he very clearly plays a role of the android dude from the first one. Like it was so obvious from the very beginning, that I thought that was a little weak. Like you could tell, like this guy obviously has a hidden agenda literally from the first moment. So I thought that was a little bit on the weak side because it was so obvious, but I also feel like his role in the movie really wasn't that significant anyways, so it didn't really matter. But I would have been, I think the movie could have had that much more if that type of character was more of a surprise or shock somewhere in the movie. Whoever played that particular role,
that's fair. Like if they had revealed one of the Marines was like a company plan or something like that, like that would have been like shocking, But I think that's a fair criticism. I don't really know if the intention was like you as the audience know that this company is shady, and so like they knew that you were going to be looking for that anyway, and they kind of just embraced it, or what. That'd be an interesting question to ask the filmmakers. I'm not sure what the intent was. Anybody want to give any other general impressions before I move on to some of our topics here?
I liked the obviously the Marines and how different they were. I was gonna say diverse, but we already had that. It's maybe not the best choice of words, right? But like I felt like they had a ton of personality. Like all of the different characters, the different Marines, they could not be any more different from each other. But they obviously had a brotherhood amongst them. So I thought that they added a nice dynamic. You had Bill Paxton's character who was like just a bro. If Rob Gronkowski was a space Marine, that's who he would be. Then you have the more serious guy. Then you've got the guy who's put in charge, and he doesn't, he's never really done anything like this before, and he's kind of a coward. But even he has some redemption throughout the movie as well.
Lieutenant Corman.
Yeah.
Yep.
So sorry, I'm not great with remembering the names.
No. I've seen this movie like probably at least like 12 to 15 times
Yeah.
like in my life, so I know backwards
So
forwards.
I thought that was a really good added dynamic instead of just making, Marine 1, Marine 2, Marine 3, like just they're pretty good.
Yeah, so that's actually you set me up for a great segue to one of our recurring segments. Who's your favorite character that's not Ripley? Again, she's excluded from because I think it's more interesting if we take her out of the mix. Like I think she's an obvious choice for several of these movies, if not all of like the Alien films. So aside from her, who's your favorite character?
For me, it's a toss up between Bro Marine, Bill Paxton's character,
Yeah,
and actually you
Hudson.
said no, and yeah, and Gorman.
Yeah,
I kind of really like his whole character arc. He's in over his head. He's kind of a coward, but when it was all said and done, like he stepped up. He stepped up and he went out like a champ when he didn't need to. He could have left her. I forgot what was her name.
Vasquez.
Vasquez. I know it was a traditional Hispanic last name. I don't know if it was Rodriguez or Lopez, but Vasquez. And he kind of goes out with her, when he didn't have to. He could have saved himself, but I kind of think I kind of think that his character felt like he was beyond saving for some of the things that he did leading up to that, and that was his way to atone and be there for her when he wasn't earlier. So I kind of like that character arc was a lot deeper than it seemed, at least for me.
Did you see the thing I posted in our Discord chat, the little excerpt from the script? I've never
No,
noticed it. I've seen this movie so many times. So
no.
when he arms the grenades in the vent,
Mhm.
and Vasquez grabs his hand, it's actually like the power like shake that she did earlier in the movie with Drake, and it's like her in the last moment showing that like she's like embraced him and like accepted him
Even
as like
even better.
it's like now I'll never be able to see that and not feel like a little bit more like emotion because it's right there in the script that James Cameron also wrote
Yeah.
wrote this film as well. And what a moment that is. Like her legs are basically all fucked up from acid. She's literally with a handgun because she's out of ammo, like fending him off. And like you said, he looks back and just doesn't even think about it, just like runs back. And yeah.
Yeah. I thought that was a pretty awesome moment for sure.
How about you, Adam? Do you have a favorite peripheral character?
I really dig the android in this one. I forget his name, of course. Doesn't matter the name.
Bishop.
Bishop. This is Bishop. Like I always think the first one's Bishop. I love how they completely switched that because again, we start the movie and Ripley's like a fucking android
Yeah,
because her
fuck
only
this guy.
experience
Yeah.
was awful. And it's like, no, this is completely normal. They don't have that bad attitude anymore. And George is talking about one of the only actual, quote unquote scary parts of the movie was when he had to crawl through that tube for like an hour or
Yeah.
whatever. But he's just
It's
like, yeah,
just-
let me do it. I gotta do it. So he was just down to just do whatever needed to be done. But my actual favorite one watching it now was probably Newt. Just the way that they chose to have her act because she'd been by herself for weeks or a month or however long it had been. And she's completely just like numb to everything. Like she's not acting like a kid anymore at all. She's like, whatever, if you die, you die. I just love the way that the direction of that little girl. She's not scared. She's not like being an annoying little kid. She's like, hey, like I know what's up, and like I ain't trying to die, but I've seen some shit. So
She's
I
shell
really like
shocked.
that.
Like,
Yeah.
like I mean, she's got the 1,000-yard stare, and like it's haunting to see that look on a child's face for sure.
Yeah, no, so he's not a child at all. She's just like she's hardened. That's like when you see, people who come up in like really bad, like they don't have a normal childhood, and then they grow up and they're just like completely different from what you expect. And that's her over the course of a month, where she's just like, yeah, you're right. So 1,000-yard stare. She's jacked up. She's like, I don't fucking like aliens, dude. Whatever. Well, I fucking don't care. And then of course we get the scene with her with the best moment of cinematography in the movie when the alien comes out of the water behind her, which is fucking great. So I'll give her points for that. And she's a kid who's sliding down a slide. That's fun too. So I'll give it to Newt. I never would have thought that, but rewatching, I'm like, Newt's pretty solid.
Probably my favorite addition to the special edition, or not edition, but like the thing that was cut, is like all the early Hadley's Hope stuff, like the colony, where you see everything like normal day-to-day life, and you see her as like an actual regular kid. You don't get that context. Like they don't show her. The first time you see Newt in the theatrical cut is when they find her, and she's already got the 1,000-yard stare. I think that contrast is super important to understand like what she was like before and like what she's been through and like what she's like now. So
Yeah, they're like, don't play in the vent, kids. Like, yeah, that's so this is crazy because again, I've only ever seen this cut of the movie. I know we're talking about favorite characters, but from the stuff that wasn't in the director's cut that is so necessary, that beginning part explaining the kids and they know the vents and you get to see how she is normally, and then where they actually get the alien by sending someone out to a ship, like go out there, we guess, or what, like the shady stuff they're doing. I can't believe that's not in the normal cut of the movie. That stuff is so necessary because otherwise they just show up and it's like you don't know what's going on. And
yeah,
you don't need to know everything, but it's like it makes no sense without those scenes.
I think like the other huge thing that I don't understand because it doesn't take up much screen time is they completely eliminate in the theatrical version any mention of Ripley's daughter dying when she's been gone, and I think that's a huge for a lot of different reasons. It's huge because you understand her sort of like why she's drawn to Newt, especially like she's like in her mind, like it's only been a few months, right? Like since she last saw her daughter because she's been in cryo sleep and all that stuff, and she's now passed away from old age. But also like I think it's just great character development for Rip. Like like there's consequences to her being out there for so long beyond just being traumatized by a savage alien creature. So, I guess for my pick, like, who I'm gonna go with Hudson because like I love Bill Paxton and I think he has an interesting he's like the opposite of Gorman in a lot of ways. Like when you watch him, he's got so much bravado. Like when they're in the dropship, like me and my squad of badasses are gonna protect you. We got all this cool shit, and he's like flexing for Ripley. As soon as the shit hits the fan, he completely crumbles, and falls apart. And people are constantly having to like calm him down. But you see his training kick in, like when at the end when they're all crawling through the ceiling, he's like in battle mode and he's talking shit again and he's firing and he kind of like gets it back together. And I think like you're like, wow, like that training must have really been solid because like he's been shitting his pants waiting for something to happen. And now that it's going down, like he's absolutely not like crumbling under pressure anymore. He's fucking killing stuff. Like, he goes down like a badass too.
Yeah. Fight, flight, and then fight.
Yeah, I guess, but yeah, like I've always, and of course, like he's just hilarious. He's got some of the best lines in the movie. Game over, man, as I think Adam said, like at the top of the podcast. Of course, like we're on an express elevator to hell, going down. Yeah, I mean, he's just, I love Bill Paxton, and I think definitely a breakout role for him for sure. He was in the original Terminator for all of like 5 seconds. He gets killed like immediately, like in the first scene with Schwarzenegger. But
he one of the biker dudes.
Yeah, one of the punks with the not T2 but T1. Like they're the punks with like looking at the telescope like out on the top of LA or whatever. Yeah. I think he punches through his like chest or something. Yeah, he goes down pretty fast. And one last thing to mention before we move on, because we were talking about cut stuff. So those early Hadley Hope scenes, by the way, they totally stole that line. He recycled it for Terminator 2. Like, every time we ask, they tell us don't ask. Like that's the whole thing in Terminator 2 with Cyberdyne is like, every time we ask them where we got the chip, they say don't ask. So that's kind of neat. All right, let's talk about what's your favorite new addition to the universe. It can be like literally anything you want. So like weapons, ship, a type of like alien. Like what's a way that you think or something that you like the way that this movie expands the universe of Alien and Predator films? What's your favorite addition or expansion?
Who's going?
I can go first. So there's a really silly one and then a serious one. Okay. I love how they build on that everyone cryo sleeps in their underwear because all the Marines just in their underwear. This is how it's done. It's not just like a weird, like we want to get Sigourney Weaver kind of naked because it's a 70s movie. They're like, no, everyone's in their underwear and t-shirt. Let's go. That's a fun one. But my main thing, I mean, having the lore of the aliens, especially the Queen, which is the great, like that came out in, sorry, George, I had to take it from you. It was either that or weapons. The Queen just like coming out of nowhere because you would not expect that to that point. You're just like, oh, there's a lot of eggs. And, we know eggs turn people into aliens, but having that actually there and being a menacing force the way it is for the last 20 minutes of that movie is great. And of course, just giving it intelligence where she's putting fire towards the eggs and it's like, all right, back up. And I love she like points at her goons and they're like, all right, fam, and they just take a back step and back in the hallway. And I'm like, I love how they went from just like, all right, here's the scary monsters that we know about, and here's something completely different, and it changes everything that we know about the aliens in like, a whole 5-minute scene. So I think that's great. Good addition. Sorry, George, I took the big one.
Yeah, yeah. For me, it definitely would have been the queen and just their purpose. They have purpose. They're sentience. They're they're like they feel. They have concerns. That it was obviously something that was missing from the first movie. When you just think like it was more the xenomorph played more of a like psycho killer in a in a horror movie. Where here it's just there was a lot more to them without them speaking, which is actually pretty cool, right? Being able to tell that story without words, was pretty cool. So after that, if I can't use that, probably would have to go with the Marines, right? The Marines slash their weaponry, right? That fucking chain gun thing that's attached to them or whatever that is.
So it's a smart gun. The intention, if you play like any of the like old video games, is like the reason it's on that rig is like it tracks movement, right. And like they can just pull the trigger and it will like move on its own. That's what it's supposed to be doing.
I thought that was super cool. There's just like I didn't know what the military looked like, right? Because I feel like in a typical movie like this, the first scene would have been the instead of just regular people, it would have been like military people fighting this thing. That's your traditional action or horror movie. But now you're kind of seeing like a little bit of the organization of, whatever, what that looks like, their military force, how they plan to attack or fight these things. And the answer is they didn't have a whole lot of answers, but that was interesting to see. And especially with the context of the time, right? This is the 80s. So kind of their vision of the future, which is pretty cool. So like those weapons themes still seem futuristic even now today, right? So putting this into perspective for the time, I thought it was super impressive that they came up with that idea. Smart gun, right? Like now we use the word smart for anything that's automated in any sense. So that's
cool. Adding on to that, the pulse rifle. It's just straight up the assault rifle from Halo. Like it's got the counter for the ammo and everything. I'm like, yeah, this is just exactly that.
And the technology of Mass Effect too. Like, I don't know if you picked up on like number one, how big the ammo counter was on those things. And then like it's caseless ammunition. So there's no like, like cartridges or anything like with the bullets. Like they're just like, it just kind of like shaves it off. And like one magazine can hold like 99 rounds or whatever it was like on the counter.
Yep.
Which was on the grenades are super small but like super explosive. Yeah. Those
ahead
are
of
actually
its time.
Tommy guns that they like actual Thompson submachine guns, like World War II ones, that they converted and like put like molding and stuff around them to kind of hide like what it was like, and they functionally like fired, which is kind of cool.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, both of you guys took my top two. So for the, I mean, pretty like solid choices, right? Like, I mean, the Space Marines and the Queen are fantastic. I mean, they're so integral to like what makes this movie work well. I will say, let me think. The cocooning, I think, like so adding that as part of like how the aliens work is a neat touch as well. So it's not just that they're like killing people and like grabbing them or whatever. Like you actually kind of see this wall of like bodies that are like encased in like that resin or whatever, and the eggs underneath them. I think it's kind of a haunting, like grim like addition. Like when they walk in there, you're like, fuck, like this is a place I would not want to be right now. Like, even knowing the minimal that they knew, like that play, like you knew you were in a bad fucking spot with like everybody just encased in in the walls with like holes in their chest and stuff like that. So I think that was that's just a cool touch. It's something that they actually had in the original Alien like director's cut, like that they kind of like recycled for this. Cool. All right. So next thing I want to ask you guys is, what's your favorite scene? Give me like a scene or sequence that is your favorite.
going first this time, damn it. Just in case Adam takes my shit. No, for me, I think I already mentioned it though when we were watching it. My favorite scene by far is seeing the like when the aliens are they think that they're gonna be coming through the door, so they're barricading the door and sealing them and all that stuff, and then they're actually coming through the vents. But that scene where they pop out and then look, and you just see like 4 or 5 of them just kind of crawling, actually moving through the vents, kind of on the ceiling. I thought that was super cool. Like you kind of expected it, but I didn't know how it would look, especially for the time. And I think they pulled off that particular scene like was super awesome. Like you really got to feel like holy shit, these dudes are coming after you. They're coming to get you. They're organized, and you can't stop them.
The build-up's great too because like they have the
yeah.
motion tracker and they're like, that's like in the compound, like
Yeah.
I don't see anything, and they're like, we'll get back to the thing, and then they seal the door like you say, and they're like no, like that's in the room now, like where, and then you see like Hicks like look up and like he realizes like, oh man. And
It's so bad, man. It's awesome.
it kind of reminds me of the fucking Michael Bluth, like, well, I don't know what I expected when he pops up there and like looks at the light and it just they're all there. Like it's like he almost kind of knew before he knew. But yeah, that's a great pick, man. Like I think that's yeah, fantastic. How about you, Adam? You got a favorite scene?
Yeah, so it's sort of an extended scene. It's kind of 2 scenes, but I'll put them in one. The whole when the queen gets detached from her egg sac and starts going after Ripley. Because first of all, that
The
puppet,
chase. Yeah.
the chase, that puppet looks fantastic even now. I love real puppets, and it's a great time. That thing is massive, and the thing is deadly. And she's just getting out of there, and then she gets to the elevator, and then like she has to hurry up and get in, and then it comes up the elevator. I'm like, what is this thing doing? And then and then the whole fight, actually on the space station. Again, it's like pretty good. Like it doesn't necessarily hold up, I think, to today's standards or what an action scene would be. But I'm like, for 86 and an alien and her in a big mech suit, I'm like, this is great. I love that. So everything and then of course ripping Bishop in half was also a fun time because he doesn't die and still becomes MVP after that point. So, but I love everything when the queen alien like starts to go after her. That's a good time.
I think that the fight scene super holds up. Like I thought,
agree. Yeah,
I got that's Hulkbuster suit Iron Man right there. That's the kind of vibes that I got. Yeah, for 86, I think it holds up.
That's what I'm saying. For 86, it's fantastic. That's what I'm saying. Like,
and I
great
feel
for
like
the time.
that's exactly how a fight like that would go if you got into a suit like that. Like I feel like like a mech suit. That's how it would actually function in real life. It would not move like the Hulkbuster suit. Like it would not move that fast. It would be kind of like that, like machinery. So I thought that was actually a great fight scene that doesn't feel like it's dated at all.
I think like what makes both of those sequences work so well together too, like that the ending of that movie would have been epic, like if they had just left it at the platform blowing up, and them escaping, like everything that comes up to that point. It's such a surprise, like when it seems like they're doing like the wrap up, like hey, thanks for coming back, Bishop, and he's like, yeah, I'm sorry I left, but like I didn't want, it was unstable, blah blah blah, and then all of a sudden he gets ripped in half, and then there's that fight, like the power loader fight. Like I think it's one of the few instances where like kind of the fake ending like works really well in a movie, because like what follows is fucking awesome. Like Ripley in that power loader, screaming out, get away from her, you bitch. Like I imagine like people in theaters probably lost their shit like back, in the day. Like that seems like a, the equivalent of like a in game, like everyone coming through the portals and Captain America saying like Avengers assemble. Like genuinely, like I bet you people like lost their minds the first time they saw
When
that.
it's going after Newt under the floor, and it's like, again, I love the queen alien uses her tail, because again, aliens using their tail is my number one thing. She does it a lot in that fight scene, but like she just rips open the floor, giant hand goes underneath, and Newt runs, and then from the other side a giant tail comes through. I'm like, all right, let's go. Like I love this gigantic. I love puppets. I'll watch Dark Crystal all day just because there's puppets. But yeah, that's a great scene. I like it a lot.
So the Queen took 14 to 16 external crew members to operate it, and there was two stuntmen inside it to operate it. So anywhere from 16 to 18 people to make that puppet work. And designed by the late great Stan Winston as well, like who we'll see pop up again in the next movie that we're going to watch, Predator. Like he's just a master of creature design. He also did the dinosaurs for the original Jurassic Park. Like that's a guy who just knows how to design some really really cool shit that work on on great scale like that. So
It's just insane, man. Like technology has come a long way, but you got to respect like the effort it would go, like the lengths that the people would have to go through to make those things happen. Like imagine building something essentially from scratch. Like there's no, you don't go to some school to like learn how to pilot a fucking queen alien, like, you know, like and then you got two stuntmen in there like actually working this thing, moving it around, like that's pretty intense, man. Granted, it takes a lot of skill to CGI stuff and create things digitally, but damn, like building that thing, moving that thing, organizing it, you know, God, having a prop that takes 15, 16 people to work, that's crazy, man. And that's the magic of filmmaking, right? That the mystique that you would always have growing up, of the things that go on behind the scenes. Now we kind of know what goes on behind the scenes. Fucking green screen and computers, which is, like I said, still impressive, but you know, like all the illusions and the things that they would make you think that you're seeing to make movies happen, you definitely don't get that anymore, you know. And it's something that's should be appreciated for sure,
it's
you know?
never just quite for me, like anyway, like as immersive, you know, when you like when you see something like in real space versus like, you
You
know,
could
and
tell, man. As someone who's grown up watching mostly movies like that, right? Like, apart from your obvious stuff, but like, there's not a whole lot of movies I've seen where they do that, apart from Star Wars, you know. Um,
you know,
so seeing them do that is pretty freaking awesome, honestly, and pull it off.
yeah, like Frank Oz said that, like, you know, when he would do tests for like the Yoda puppet, for example, like people would actually like within like a couple of minutes of getting used to like they would interact like with the actual puppet, like intentionally, like or like subconsciously, I should say, like would lock eyes and like make eye contact like with, and they were actually reacting to and like performing with like the puppet like seamlessly, because like, you know, it's something there. Like I imagine like digital Yoda, you probably like there's probably something lost there, you know, like having something like that on screen, you know.
That also goes to, you also got to give some credit where it's due, right? These actors that are able to pull off these amazing performances without seeing anything there, or seeing, or worse, right? You've seen some dude in like spandex, right?
Yeah.
You know, like imagine talking to Gollum or something like that in the Lord of the Rings movies, you know, like you're just talking to this. So what is it? Is it Andy Serkis? Is
Yeah.
Andy Serkis just sitting there in fucking spandex suit, you know, like, and still be able to have like these impactful, like iconic scenes in movies, you know, like actors get credit either way, but it's the behind the scenes stuff that is just so impressive to me that I don't think I quite appreciate it until I watch these movies. And you can kind of tell, because CGI these days is awesome, right? Like the stuff looks real, but when you then see these puppets, you know, and animatronics and whatnot, like there's a big difference. That thing is actually there, and you can fucking tell, you know, that is not some CGI shit, and not because it looks cheap, but just because it looks so real.
Yeah, and I think in this AVP, when we go even to the more recent movies, this series, you know, Alien and Predators are pretty good with having costumes and practical stuff. I think pretty much throughout the entire thing. So that'll be fun to watch.
Another movie that does it well is the older Jurassic Parks, right? Like now they're all CGI, but when you look at some of those dinosaur puppets, the Triceratops, all that stuff, like super cool, man. You know, Ace Ventura, you know, coming out of the rhino.
Oh my god.
That's not CGI.
No, it's certainly not.
But you know, it definitely deserve some appreciation for that, man.
I cannot wait for you to see this next puppet creature thing that we deal with in the next movie. It's a fun one.
Yep. I definitely have some stuff to talk about that too, because another interesting story about the casting and the person that plays the title character. My favorite scene is since I don't want to again duplicate. So really, technically, my second favorite is probably like the entire sequence where they find the cocoon and walk through like that. Like it's the first time you kind of see like the aliens adapting and like what they can do over a long period of time. Like you only kind of saw in the original, like the alien like walking around the ship and kind of hiding and stalking people. Here's like this is what would happen like if these things like are running rampant. And then of course like the subsequent ambush, you know, just watching the Marines like get their, to quote Bill Paxton, they get their asses kicked, like, you know, like squarely. Like they lose like most of their squad, and it goes from bad to worse. Ripley, you know, rescuing them, and then coming out and immediately the fucking like their rescue ship just crashes because they don't realize but the person's been attacked as they're coming in to pick them up. So yeah, I think that whole sequence is great. That they're not allowed to use their weapons, because they've pointed out that they're in this reactor. It's not going to go well. Like it's just, it builds a lot of good suspense, and I think like the execution, kind of seeing it all through their helmet cams for a good portion of it, kind of adds to like the chaos a little bit. And feeling a little helpless alongside like Ripley and Gorman, and watching these people just like their feet just cut off, and they're gone. Sweet. And of course that set is just fantastic. Like we've talked about like a lot of the creative aspects, like once again like set design just out of the park. Like the way everything looks is just top notch. All right, what is your favorite death? So who gets death of the movie for you?
I feel like it's as easy for me, right? It's the Gorman and Vasquez scene.
It's a pretty good one.
That's they're not getting killed by aliens. They're going out on their own terms. The last little bit that they can hang on to, definitely the best death for me for sure. Yep.
Adam, how about you, man?
And how does the snitch dude die again? The corporate guy.
So he's trying to lock them out, like from escaping, like when the aliens are breaching the compound, and then he goes into like one way, like he zigs, and they end up zagging because they're locked out, and he's the one that gets eaten. Like he thinks he's going towards safety. What he's actually done is like given them a fighting chance to go through the vents, like because they can't go through there, they end up going through the vents and end up being safe.
Might not actually be my favorite one, but that guy deserved it, so I'm putting that number one.
It's the most satisfying, I think. Certainly, like it's probably the only person in the movie that's like not an alien, like, or like a creature, I should say, that like dies, that like where you're like, yeah, this is somebody I was hoping to die. I mean, yeah, Vasquez and Gorman's pretty hard to top. Like, I'm gonna go with my homie Bill Paxton again. Again, just because I love that, like, he's shitting his pants for like 45 minutes straight, and he's talking mad shit. Like, oh, you want some? Fuck you! Just firing off grenades and like shooting everybody, and like he's dialed in. And then the floor, like he's just looking up and he's looking out, and then the floor opens up and like down he goes, and you can kind of see the hands pulling him, and he's like trying to reach up and adios, man. It's a rough one, but he also kind of goes out heroically, not as heroically, of course, as Gorman and Vasquez, but it's still pretty good. You're not expecting it at all, to come from below. You figure like something's going to overwhelm them, and nope. Not only were they coming from the ceiling, but they're coming from the floor apparently too. So makes it that much more tense in that scene.
Yep.
All right. So I think that brings us to, do you think it holds up? Like, the question that we're going to ask for probably most of these movies, like as we start getting maybe more recent, like, like that might be more of a like redundant question. It'll be more like, I don't know. We'll alter that a little bit. Something like maybe, do you think it was necessary or something like that? Like
maybe if it, like, does it stack? Like, does it meet the expectations for the time? Right. Yeah. Like these movies. Yeah, for sure. The first one holds up. This one I would think holds up even more because the action aspect to it, it has a much broader appeal. I think, anybody could watch that and still dig it. They don't rely, and there's not a whole lot of the weird, because obviously the stuff that still looks cheap are like the space effects, right? Like ships and that kind of stuff still looks kind of cheap. It's better in this one, but just the actual, shooting, the shoot 'em up stuff, the aliens, all that stuff looks great. It can easily hold up. Definitely still ahead of its time. But yeah, I think as we get closer to the more recent movies, it'll be like, is this shit on par with the stuff that they have available to them? You're going to get less of a pass as we get to newer and newer movies and what they have available to them. So,
yeah, we'll figure it out. Like, I think I may ask the question is like, was this movie necessary? Because I think like, as you get further into the timeline, there are definitely some entries that are very questionable where it's like, was this, does this add anything like interesting, or was this just a cash grab, right? Is this
Yeah.
just throwing a, something at the wall to see if it sticks kind of thing?
I did kind of off topic, but I did want to mention something. One thing that I really appreciated about this movie, and granted, I didn't see the theatrical version, so I don't know what was cut and what wasn't, or how much in time. But I felt like this movie gave us a lot of things that they didn't need to give us. They could have cut a lot of the stuff that they gave us in this movie in terms of lore, like when you said that it had like a second ending, or an extra ending rather. Like they didn't have to do any of those things for this to still be a successful, good commercial box office hit. But I felt like this movie just had, like, it was written all over that it just wanted to be done right. And you could see that with all the stuff that they give with the length, the background story, the second ending, doing everything right. I thought was really awesome. They could have cut out 45 minutes of this movie or an hour of this movie, and it still would have been a success. It would have been fine. People would have enjoyed it. But they actually wanted to give us a complete, full, and finished product. So, bravo for that, man.
Yeah, the budget was 18.5 million as opposed
God,
to, I'm trying to think of like what the
inflation for that was.
The first one like 11 million or something.
yeah, I'm looking back to see
18 million in 1986, right?
Yeah, 11 million. So about 7 million more, with a 7-year differential.
So
roughly.
that's still a pretty low budget for that kind of movie. That would be 43 million today.
Yeah, and like I think like it's a good use of like money. Like it has like a high I think like high production value. Like it feels like a big budget film. Certainly garnered a lot of it. Talking a little bit about the success for a second, since you touched on that. Numerous Academy Award nominations, which was awesome.
For the record, when you're talking about budget, right? So that movie's $18 million budget would be $43 million today in 2021. That very terrible Prometheus movie that I didn't like had a budget of $130 million, just to put things in perspective. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah,
Chris.
I mean, yeah, it goes to like I said, like show like how like you can really spend like your money well, or kind of squander it and stuff. So yeah, I was gonna say like, so there were a lot of Academy Award nominations for this film. So including Best Actress for Sigourney Weaver, which is like must have been an honor, because you think like even now by today's standards, like we really still stop and talk about when a superhero ends up like in like a Best Picture discussion, or like a performance in a superhero movie. It's a big deal. Imagine in 86 like a sci-fi like action movie like this to get accolades like that. Must have been quite exciting, like, and it's cool like that it was well received. I mean, it was a hit, it was a smash at the box office. And I think cemented probably a lot of like the success, like, and kind of this becoming a franchise versus like just like a one-off with like a sequel. Adam, do you think it holds up?
Yeah, I think it holds up extremely well. Everything except for one casting choice, which George hates. I think
yeah, elephant in the room. So Jeanette Goldstein, we've kind of mentioned it, is a Jewish American actress, and she plays Vasquez. I mean,
different times, man. That
it was
wouldn't fly
86.
today.
I can't get mad about anybody.
Yeah, I'm not.
Ago.
I'm just giving shit. I was
giving you shit too.
I was not upset by any means, but it just shows different times, man. That shit would not fly today. You wouldn't have someone who's not Hispanic playing
ScarJo. That's all I'll say.
We even made the joke that the black sergeant should have his last name should have been Hernandez or something like that, just to like be ridiculous. But no, this movie's great. It still holds up. I think it, even to today's standards, it's still like a super solid action movie. So yeah, it's great.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with both of you. I think this holds up extremely well. Again, the influence is massive, not only in like within the franchise itself, but like outside of that. Like, and if you play through any of the Halo campaigns, there's always references to this, like intentional references, lines. Like the character of Johnson in Halo, the sergeant, is definitely like confirmed to have been based on Apone, the black sergeant from Aliens, who was a real life army sergeant prior to becoming an actor, Al Matthews. And like I think, like I said, just it's undeniable, right? Like when you think of sci-fi action, like most things are come back to this for an influence, because it really wasn't. I mean, you had Star Wars, of course, like, you know, but that like is a very different thing than Aliens, and the type of action that you have, the adult themes, you know, like this is very much like gritty sci-fi action, whereas Star Wars is kind of fantasy sci-fi action. And I think a lot of what came after it was a huge debt to this movie. I mean, it's super influential. And I think that about wraps it up. Unless you guys want to touch on anything else before we
Were we giving scores? Did we gave scores in the first one,
we
right?
can we could give like a number score if you want to. Sure, we're not ranking yet, but yeah, we can.
We're not
like,
ranking. Well, it'd be interesting. Yeah, give out the scores and then rank it later to see if it's consistent, right? This would be a good way to go back and compare recency bias and whatnot. But okay. All right. Okay. I'll give it, to me, this is a 10. I think I gave what, an 8.9, I think it was, to
8, 9.
Alien. So to me, this is 10. To me, this is I'm giving it context for the time. Is this my favorite movie of all time? No. But giving what, like, the impact that it had on me watching it for the first time in 2021, like, that is to me like a masterpiece, right? If you can show someone that movie for the first time some 35 years later, and right, 35 years, is my math off? Yeah, 35 or so years. And it
on.
Yeah, and it hit like that. That's fucking good. That is up there. There's very few movies that I've watched that could do that. You know, you've got The Godfather, Star Wars, of course, but yeah, man, this to me, I'm putting it up there as a 10. So I'm a little nervous for the rest of these movies, because I know that there's some not so great ones that we're gonna watch at some point. I know that
You still have some. You still have plenty of good stuff ahead, so I can put you at ease. Like, I'm not gonna lie to you. Like, you know,
there's some stinkers. I know that.
that, and also like we're peaking pretty early. Like, not to imply that this is like definitely my top pick or anything, but I mean, like, this is obviously a high point, right? Like, be stupid to say anything otherwise. So, but like, there's still some really. I mean, including the next movie we're gonna watch. I think you're gonna fucking love that.
It's tough, because like for me, like a 10 is traditionally has to be something that's perfect, and I don't think this is perfect, but I'm trying to think of it in context. It's a sequel. You have a new director. The amount of things that he has to make work here, I just find it super impressive all around. You know, like, it's just such a great. I think it's a perfect job more so than a perfect movie. You know, perfect.
Yeah, that's when I think of like how like I'm gonna rate a movie.
Yeah.
I think like what was the intent, right? Like, and then like how successful was like the intent of like what they're trying to do, right? Like for something like that, like, you know, if the intent of a movie is to like make me laugh and like you get a couple chuckles from me, like I'm not gonna get like how you would rate like a perfect comedy versus like a perfect drama is very different things, right? Like, so anyway, but not to digress too much. Adam, what would you score it? Like if you're gonna put a score on it?
I gave Aliens, the original Alien, my bad, a 9. I would also give Aliens a 9. And they're different 9s. They're 9 for a different reason, but I feel that they're both extremely good movies on their own for different reasons. But at this moment, I put them about equally. Like, we'll get to whenever we actually rank them, but it's hard for me to decide which I like better between Alien and Aliens because they're so different.
Yeah.
So I'm going to put them, they're both great. So I'll put them both up there, but I wouldn't personally rate it higher than the original, but its rating is also based off a different criteria completely.
Yeah, I couldn't have put it better. They're completely different movies, and there's no secret that this one just appeals to me more. But I feel like the reason why I was at a 9, but the reason I gave it that extra point is because, dude, like, how often do you see a movie where like you've got one person take it in this direction, right? And then someone goes in a completely different direction, makes a completely different movie with the same subject matter and completely fuck it up. Star Wars. But like, and it's hard to do for James Cameron to take Alien and then make something completely different using all of the same stuff and the same set and everything that's going on and still give you a banger, like a hell of a movie, and do that. Good job. Good job. That's what puts it over.
I think he's such an intelligent director and understanding like probably what the non-negotiables were, right? Like I want to do a different movie, but like here's the stuff that needs to be like consistent in the universe, right? So like having the face huggers, having the chest burster, like the acid for blood, like the company, like, and even going back to LV-426, like the planet, I think is a smart choice because like it allows for a little bit more like tension and suspense because when you were first watching that movie, you're like, I don't know what's gonna happen exactly. And this one, like like what's out there and like what the threat is and how serious it is, and um, amping up the stakes early on and saying, oh yeah, there's like a whole colony of like families there. Like he takes it in a different direction, but he's smart in keeping the things that like really work and are gonna like he'd be stupid to throw out while still expanding stuff like we talked about. I'm gonna give this a 10 as well, for not only suspense reasons, but because I firmly believe that I gave Alien a 10. I'm giving this a 10. Like it's the hardest discussion that I have, internally and like with other people of like which one is like better. Because like I said, I it's easy. I can easily say this is probably my favorite of the two, like rewatchability. That doesn't necessarily mean that I think it's the best. And like that's it's going to be a hard thing to talk about when we do our next episode and actually rank these because they are both such good movies. But as you guys have pointed out, like it's been kind of the theme of the show, they're very different from one another, and I think that's a good thing, by all means. But it does make them hard to compare when it gets down to it.
It's going to come down to personal preference. Just what style of movie appeals to you the most. I think that's what it comes down to. Like, yeah, like I can't take anyone seriously that tells me that one movie is definitively better than another. It's just like which appeals to you more. Which one do you just find more interesting based off of what you like? But as far as like a product that's put together, the whole production, both of these movies are just as good. I'm inserting that personal preference now. It's really the only difference between these two movies for me personally.
Yeah, it'll be a very interesting discussion next week when we get to our first benchmark. Especially when comparing these two. Predator, I feel like, is so different from both of those. Like that'll be a little easier to like, especially you can compare apples to apples. I think with Predator and Aliens, like, and you'll kind of see why. Like when we watch it, I want to keep your, I don't want you to have any preconceived notions, but like you'll see what I mean. Watch it. That's another one I can't wait to just.
Well, you guys ruined that meme, the handshake meme, because what I would have seen that at some point in the damn movie, and I would have been like,
That's okay. You'll find some other stuff that you like lines and things like that. You're gonna be like,
I wonder if I would have picked up on that. I'm like, is that the meme? Is that the fucking meme?
Yes.
So I'll be keeping an eye out for that for sure.
Also, for any listeners, if you're listening to these as they come out, I believe Predator is on Hulu, so I believe that's all I'll be watching it.
Oh, and speaking of which, by the way, in case anyone is interested, I saw this too late, but IMDb TV, like the app on Fire Stick, Roku, is showing Alien for free, completely free.
Nice.
Or you could pay $5 like an idiot like me instead.
It's okay.
But free's free.
And of course, it's all dependent on when you're listening to this too, like because that shit changes all the time. So there's that caveat as well. Just toss out there, but Predator is going to be pretty simple. There's only one cut that I know of that exists out there. So if you're watching along and you want to watch it ahead of our podcast, it's the one and only Predator. And if you really want to go ahead, Alien 3 will be watching the assembly cut of that. And that does it for this episode. Thanks for hanging out, fellas. I can't wait to watch the next movie. And I would say probably, for the audience members out there, you could count on about every other week for us releasing episodes until we're caught up to like, a calendar, like, because there's 12 movies, 12 months. We'll eventually move to probably a monthly release once we're caught up. We got a little catching up to do. But for now, you can probably expect our next episode in about 2 weeks. All right. That does it. Have a good day, good night, and thanks for listening.
Peace.